So here is our second semifinal match. Austin Collins, the 15-year-old from the Missouri area, reading a book.
Very invested in this match, as you can see. I wonder what he's reading. I hope it's The Art of War.
It's homework, Ryan. When you go on these weekends, you got to bring your homework with you.
Yeah, the book's just not thick enough to be The Art of War.
The Art of War is actually only like about 100 pages.
It's usually in large print.
Okay, you're. Yeah, I'm sure. Good cover. Good cover.
I'm ready for everything.
Here's Matt Courier on the play from Austin Collins. Hits into knock Ely to 19 and grabs a card.
That's the ideal start.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of this early pressure when Austin's on the play. He can be advantaged. And it does look like he has some follow-up. An Earthshaker Kenra. Now, both of his lands are Ramanap Ruins, so he's going to start taking damage off his lands.
This is generally a matchup where that doesn't matter too much. He played a red mirror previously in the top 8. That can add up against Team Energy. The matchup's largely about getting ahead on the battlefield, getting enough shots in the early game, getting chip shots later. Not so much about your own life total.
So some choice of 2-drops from Collins. While he did have the Kenra, he made Harsh Mentor this turn. And we go back. Elias second land, no play, but a removal spell may loom.
You want to keep the Kenra on reserve in case Eli's turn 2 play was either Servant of the Conduit or Long Tusk Cub. That was not the case. Though Harsh Mentor doesn't have haste, though, so you get to start connecting on this turn. So everything's still fine.
Austin goes to combat. We'll see if he gets a third card under the Courier. Looks like he does. Ely has Harness Lightning. He cares about that Harsh Mentor. He'll take care of that one and actually take the damage off Courier.
If the follow-up is Whirler Virtuoso, you don't want to play that into Mentor.
Yeah, that would make sense. Though that Courier getting a lot of cards under it, Ely will have to be concerned there.
3 is quite a lot. Unlikely that Austin's trying to convert on this turn. If Ely has another removal spell and can untap and cast that, this is still very fine.
Well, if you're worried about Whirler Virtuoso, Austin has the answer. One of his 2 main deck copies of Rampaging Ferocidon was his play for the turn.
And this is a really nice curve so far for Austin.
Make sure you do that before you leave today, because playmat vouchers cannot be redeemed.
Yeah, won't be able to stabilize with the Virtuoso. And you see in Eli's hand, there is a Whirler Virtuoso.
It's a fine play because it can't block the Ferocidon without making a Thopter first. You're not in love with it, especially if you try to make the Thopter and make a double block and Austin just has a shock or some such to make that exchange favorable for Austin. That's really not where you want to be. You'd rather just have some removal spells here.
Kassis will cast Attune with Aether. Now, the issue, Ryan, though, is that if he doesn't play a blocker, this Matt Courier is getting too many cards under it. Next turn, we're very live for Austin to cash that in.
Yeah, just 2 cards left in Austin's hand. Won't be hard to empty those out. If he can empty those out, make a land drop, cast a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and have red left over to activate the Matt Courier, that would be very bad news for Ely.
So, Attune makes Long Tusk Cub. There is 2 energy hiding out, so Ely can make it a 3/3 if he needs to. Let's see what the judge ruling is here. Austin had begun his untap, and the judge will rule whether or not Austin can still get that point of damage off the Ferocidon. It looks like he'd like to. Depends really what was said here.
I guarantee he would like to.
Yeah. We'll see if he gets the 1 point. The judge is going to rule on it.
Pretty high pressure match. Pretty easy to get ahead of yourself in situations like this. So we'll find out.
Sure, so some discussion among the players. Now that Cub won't be able to block Rampaging Ferocidon. The Ferocidon has Menace, but it does keep the Courier back.
Assuming that Austin can't pre-combat, empty his hand out, just get a card under the Courier and sacrifice it once it's blocked, which is a frequent line that you do see with Matt Courier.
And both those kind of just explaining, they're trying to figure out where Austin had been in the motions on the untap here. We'll go ahead and stay on the match while we wait for the judge's ruling. Either way, 1 point or not, this still looks like a good board, I think, for Austin Collins.
Yes. Eli's draw has not shaped up to be terribly quick. You want to have some mix of removal spells and efficient creatures. Though against this particular draw, where Austin goes Harsh Mentor, Rampaging Ferocidon, started on Matt Courier, it's getting a lot of cards under it. These are the draws that force Ely to have a particularly good hand. And his hand has mostly just been fine to this point. Yeah, this is the kind of hand that plays a little bit more in like a Teamer mirror, where you set up your Long Tusk Cub, maybe get it large, you have a little bit more time to play with.
All right, looks like the ruling has been appealed to the head judge, so we're going to head back to the booth for a second here. It's Austin Collins versus Ely Kassis. Yeah, and you mentioned it feels like a slow start from Ely, but then you go ahead and look at what was cast. He's got a turn 2 removal spell, turn 3 Attune and Long Tusk Cub. It's not the best of draws. I mean, you'd love to see some sort of 1 mana spell. But there's only 1 Magma Spray in Ely's deck. He's not capable of that much faster.
That's true. There's 2 Lightning Strike, 3 more Harness Lightning. He'd like to have access to some of that. Probably would rather play a 3 mana creature than the Long Tusk Cub on that turn, because 3 mana creatures, they can already check the Bomat Courier, and they really can't do a reasonable enough job against the Ferocidon as it is.
Sure. So it looks like the situation right now is that the ruling is that the trigger will still go through. Ely Kassis has appealed the ruling, so we'll await the head judge's word.
And in this situation, you're looking for some specific things. There's a lot of very strong turns that could happen next for Colin.
Okay.
If he's able to...
Even just a removal spell.
Yeah, removal spell makes for good attacks on the following turn. Something that uses very little mana, leaves cards he doesn't care about in his hand, so he can activate the Bomat Courier. Even something like Land Hazaret, that's really tough to beat.
So he's drawing up to 3 cards. I'd love it if one of them were the 4th land. So he can make a 4th land, play a card, leave up a red. He'd have 1 card in hand and 4 cards under the Courier. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. So Ely has some energy now, so he can't shock down the Long Tusk Cub, but it's a spot where, depending on what's in your hand, you're kind of fine just shocking upstairs and activating the Bomat Courier.
And even so, he could Abrade and Lightning Strike it. All right, so the head judge has upheld the ruling, so we'll go back into the match. The 1 damage will be taken, and you see Ely Kassis brought down to 15. So we untap, now going to Austin's 4th turn. And he didn't have the land for. I mentioned I really would like to see him have it, but he drew it. And you know, Ryan, I'm looking like it could be a very strong hand. We have Kenra, land, and I think Shock. So he could cast everything and leave up the Courier.
Oh yeah, so what you do here, you cast the Kendra, target the Long Tusk Cub. Either it can't block this turn, or either it responds, and then you just get to shock the Cub.
Good, so the Earthshaker Kenra. Yeah, it says target creature with power equal to or less than the Shaker Kenra cannot block this turn. So Austin says, I'm going to target your Long Tusk Cub. And Ely's probably going to pump in response. And if he does, he's going to lose the Long Tusk Cub. And yeah, Austin spends another card, but he's got this Bomat Courier. That's fine.
Well, he doesn't really spend a card, right? He's just casting a Kendra. This is an incidental value ability.
Yeah.
And then he just gets to shock the Cub if this works. And if not, look how much damage he's connecting for.
So if Ely doesn't pump here, Austin, he attacks for 6, sends the shock upstairs, make it 8, and then just get a new hand off Courier. I mean, this is great in all respects.
And from there, Ely's at 7 against 4 fresh cards going into the draw step. Austin still has all these creatures. He has these Raminap Ruins.
Right, I mean, he just draws another land off the Bomat Courier's cards.
Looks like Ely's going to let it go.
Okay, so he really respects the removal spell. All the creatures can attack. 6 damage in. Kassis is down to 9. There's a shock in Austin's hand. There is a Rampaging Ferocidon on the board, too. There's a lot to like here.
And given that there's no action that has caused the Bomat Courier to otherwise die, Austin can take some more time, maybe get another card or 2 under the Courier.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Like, Austin's already at a spot where cashing out the Courier is good, but he doesn't have to. He can just keep putting more cards under it. And if he gets another good attack off, I mean, we're done. There's no way he doesn't draw lethal off the Courier.
Right.
So Whirly Virtuoso made for Kassis. He goes to 8 from the Ferocidon.
This gives him enough energy for 2 Thopters, though those are going to do 1 damage each to Ely.
Yeah, I don't know if you can make Thopters while that Ferocidon's around. And
doesn't feel great.
Ely passes. I want to see, we're going to see a shock from Austin. Yeah. He's going to put, I think, Ely to 6. Let's shoot that upstairs. That's always a good sign.
Yeah. Have to figure that the Bomat Courier is not going to be able to engage in relevant combat next turn.
And the 1 main deck Spell Pierce here from Kassis comes up big. So no shock. Austin actually can use that last mana to draw the cards off the Courier right now. Now, if he had waited a turn, he could have gotten another card under the Courier.
This opens him up to drawing haste creatures, be the Earthshaker Kenra, on-crop Crasher. So that's the argument for making the play this way. Obviously, drawing 4 cards does not line you up to cast Hazoret this turn,
Yeah.
though you should be set up to do that in 2
I mean,
turns.
if you draw 4 cards and one of them is Hazoret and your opponent's at 8,
Yeah, that's
I'm not
fine.
as worried about
Right.
not being able to attack this turn. You know, we'll find a way to deal some damage.
I wouldn't call that a huge problem.
Now he's getting up to the point where eternalizing that Kenra might come into play.
Oh, yeah.
So Kassis is at 8. We go back to Austin Collins. 4 cards in hand. He made a land drop for the turn. Looks like he has a Lightning Strike. I believe an Earthshaker Kenra.
Lightning Strike's really strong here.
Yeah.
Kenra can make combat awkward.
All right, well, here's the Hazoret.
Sure.
Takes 1 on his own. Mentioned it. Can't attack yet. Darn.
Not easy to lose once you start controlling that card with life totals like this.
Bomat Courier, Austin to 12. Needs to be a little careful on his own life total. You see another land in hand. He's got 2 cards left. He can't play that land. He already made a land this turn, so no attacks for Hazoret. And I'll just say go.
Yeah, there's no real profitable attacks right now. Ely can make some Thopters, throw creatures in front of these ones.
Yeah, and next turn Austin's going to drop to 3 cards. He can make the land drop and discard both the cards in his hand, both the one in his hand and one he draws, to put Ely to 4. Very possibly just has a lethal attack next turn.
Presumably cast some burn spells.
Sure.
Maybe another haste creature in the mix.
And in the main deck, looking at Ely Kassis' side, I don't believe, outside these 2 confiscation coups, that he can get rid of a Hazoret. So if he doesn't have one, he's got to try to race back. Long Tusk Cub will swing. Austin's Hazoret cannot block yet. Still has 2 cards in hand.
I like not blocking if I'm Austin. I think that the best case scenario here for Ely is if this eats a relevant creature.
Yeah, he looks like he wants to put the Earthshaker Kenra in front of the Cub. Now,
If you force an activation on the Cub, you do stop a Thopter from going down.
Yeah, Cub goes to a 3/3. Kenra's in the yard. Austin can eternalize that at some point here. Now, I don't know if next turn he wants to do land eternalize because he'd still then have 2 cards in hand.
Right, I assume next turn the plan involves just casting spells out of his hand.
Rogue Refiner from Kassis, he drops to 7.
Especially once you have access to hazard activations, and with the board getting this gummed up, you're really not going to have a good window to unearth the Kenra. You have some guaranteed damage in other aspects.
And with Ely at 7, he cannot play another creature. Austin can make land 6, threatens 6 damage off Hazoret over the course of 2 turns.
Good argument for Austin just getting to a point where he can block with the Hazoret, just finish the game with some burn spells or activations of the Hazoret. With the Rogue Refiner Virtuoso, that's a good number of blockers already. The Rogue Refiner Energy put him back up to 6, so we can make 2 Thopters. Ely has a decent amount of damage on a crackback as well.
Can't attack yet. 3 cards still in hand. I see Austin counting up. I'm not sure how much more damage Austin actually can get in combat here. It feels like he's going to be looking to that Hazoret and those Ramanap Ruins to end the game.
Yeah, I think in terms of attacking and blocking, Austin's finally at a point where he's a little bit behind. He's behind enough where he has to be worried about his own life total if he makes an attack.
It's going to make land 6. And we'll see. So now 2 cards in hand, 6 lands. We'll see if he wants to cast anything. His last 2 cards are Earthshaker Kenra and Karizev. Neither of them are great at attacking here.
Yeah, Karizev also pretty bad at blocking.
Looks like he's going to discard one of his cards to deal 2.
With him doing that now, I imagine he's looking at attacking with the Hazoret.
Okay. Yeah, that either forces a chump block or forces... Well, we'll see. Here's Earthshaker Kenra from Austin, actually. He'll go to 11. He's actually going to cast it as opposed to discarding it. So Whirler Virtuoso cannot block. Kenra, Ferocidon, Bomat Courier Hazard. He's going far more aggressive. Card under Courier.
Yeah, this is now 4 attackers to 1 blocker. If the Virtuoso makes Thopters, that's a point apiece.
You should just assume that the Ferocidon's going to be unblocked with Menace. That's too many resources.
Right, so you put a Thopter in front of Hazoret, you can block 2 other creatures, you take 3, you'll be at 3, that's dead to Lightning Strike.
If it's not dead to Lightning Strike, it means Ely can't play any more creatures because Austin has a card in hand and a Hazoret in play.
Yep.
So 2 more Thopters, Ely down to 5 off that Ferocidon. And those main deck Ferocidons, there's so much work here against Whirler Virtuoso. They have really, it really has been the difference.
Yes, those main deck kind of sideboard-looking cards.
Yeah.
This is a matchup where they really pay dividends, and it makes sense. It's the most popular matchup in the room.
Yeah, like when Teamer is 65% of the room, sure, I can main deck sideboard cards and not feel bad at all.
Ferocidon also just one of your more important cards in some other matchups, some of the fringe ones. For example, controlling Rampaging Ferocidon when your opponent tries to cast Approach the Second Sun. That can be pretty impactful.
And looks like the damage is there. Ely will pick up the cards, and it is Austin Collins, Ramanap Red, on the play. You mentioned there, he is where he's the strongest, and he takes game number 1.
Takes that one pretty convincingly.
Yeah, I mean, the counting toward the end there got close, but you never really felt that Ely could turn the corner, that he could actually start attacking.
Yeah, and because of that Kenra there, removing the blocker by default, that really made it so Austin was able to close the game easily. And even if he didn't have the Kenra, pretty realistic that Austin can just hang back and win the game with some burn spells, some Hazoret activations.
All right, well, game 2 will be still a pre-boarded game. This one will have Ely Kassis on the play. And he'd like to get one of those before we sideboard. We'll be back with that match after just these messages. So we're back here. Ely Kassis, the number 8 seed. He is currently mulliganing to 6 here. For the second game, he's going to be on the play. Last game, Austin Collins really with a strong curve out. We saw Bomat Courier, Harsh Mentor, and I think the cincher was Rampaging Ferocidon.
Yes.
Whirler Virtuoso was the card that Ely would stabilize against that board with. He had it, but Austin had the answer.
The menace on the Ferocidon also allows it to just generate a lot of damage in combat. That was good for a lot of points. Little Hazoret kicker.
Yeah, and that really has been something with Ixalan that has powered up Red in this matchup. Before Ixalan, we just had On-Crop Crasher in that spot, and looking at that game, if that Ferocidon was a Crasher, Ely may have been able to win.
Yeah, that's like an On-Crop Crasher, no exert, but also hope you don't block game.
Yeah, it's just
you
so different.
Pretty much need your opponent to make a mistake in those spots. And it makes sense that Ely would be mulliganing relatively aggressively in this matchup. He knows that he has to have a handful of efficient spells. He has stuff like Vizier of Many Faces and Bristling Hydra that he really doesn't want to have in his opening hand in this matchup. Confiscation Coup. We just want a bunch of 1s and 2s. Hopefully some of them are red removal spells.
Ely keeping on 6, contemplating that Scry. It's good enough. He'll keep it on top. And we have game number 2. A lot of times we're going to look at how fast Austin's start is. He had Bomat Courier last game. It looks like a wonder up this game, but this time it will be Soul Scar Mage.
That'll do. It's no tidings. It's pretty strong, though.
Did draw 4 off that Courier. For Kassis, turn 2, Long Tusk Cub. Did not have the attune, so right now it could be hit by Shock.
Be a nice exchange for Austin. You don't often get to just kill the Long Tusk Cub.
And Austin has some options. Looks like he has Carry Zev in hand, and that could in theory block a Cub, but that's really scary. You'd like to spend a removal spell.
Yeah. Once the Cub starts getting to be a 3/3, 4/4, becomes a much bigger problem. Leading on Cub, though, kind of suggests that Ely has a good follow-up to it.
Yeah, here's Harsh Mentor from Collins.
That's a nice check on Long Tusk Cub.
It's a lot of damage if Ely wants to use Cub.
Yeah, those +1/+1 counters are not worth paying 2 life generally.
There's a risk. If Ely just has a removal spell, this is a very tough board for Austin. Remove Harsh Mentor, swing Long Tusk Cub.
The thing about it is that it takes some very specific things for Ely to both have a removal spell this turn and make enough energy for a +1/+1 counter.
Ooh.
So the Harsh Mentor is actually pretty reasonable.
Now, Ryan, Ely swung his Long Tusk Cub, and actually Collins, no blocks. Took 2, and Ely got 2 energy, and now Rogue Refiner will bring him up to 4.
So it looks like Collins is reading Ely for just not having a removal spell for the Mentor.
Okay, so maybe Ely had a Virtuoso that he was trying to unlock.
Right. Yeah, Austin's just thinking, you know, I think I get the most damage in if I maintain this Mentor. If it sticks around, you can't really convert the Cub because you have to take 2 damage for every additional 1 you're trying to deal me immediately.
And Austin wants to race. On Crop Crasher turn 3, Exert, no block on Rogue Refiner, attacks in for 6. Kassis down to 13.
The Crasher also makes a lot of sense with the no blocks. At most, Ely's going to have 1 blocker. He could have 2 if he had Whirler Virtuoso, but that's a shock from the Mentor as well.
But Ely accepts the race. He'll hit Austin back to 13, and he's really stocking up on energy. Those Long Tusk Cub hits are adding up. Ely's up to 7 energy.
You'll note he's still not interested in pumping the Cub.
No, he's going to play another Long Tusk Cub and another Long Tusk Cub.
I see.
Okay.
As you make your way to your seats, I'd like to remind you of a couple of things.
Those are strong blockers.
Yeah, they're X2s, and the Crasher's not untapping. But for Collins, it's Hazaret. He'll pass, though, as he has a 3-card hand. And I'm a bit concerned on Austin's side. All these Long Tusk Cubs with all this energy from Ely means that he can all in on an attack pretty fast here.
At their base, we're looking at 9 power, there's 7 energy available. That's +3. That's 1 shy of lethal.
So here's a swing with everything. It's 1 shy of lethal.
Unless we have a Harness Lightning with no energy spent.
Yeah, Ely's going to think it through.
Even you could kill a 2 toughness creature. Especially if you just hit the Harsh Mentor, you don't really have any concerns.
And yeah, that's the play here. Everything attacks. Austin can say no blocks and lose to a Harness Lightning, because you're counting, 6 from the Cubs, 3 from the Rogue Refiners, 9. Spend all the energy, it's 3 more, that's 12. But if Ely makes that play, he's taking 6 damage off Harsh Mentor, going to 7 against a Hazaret, non-Crop Crasher. He's certainly dead on the swing back.
So if Ely has Harsh Lightning, you kind of got to figure that he wants to just hit the Harsh Mentor and then just pump these Cubs. And the question is, can you still win the game if he has that Harness Lightning?
And I like this block from Austin. He's thinking about just letting the Soulscar Mage go and taking all the rest of the damage, saying, I'll survive this turn and I'm going to win on the swing back.
Bunch more energy coming in for Ely.
Yeah,
3
hits,
Cubs
6
connecting,
more.
and you see none of them pumped again.
Okay, Austin's at 7.
That means there's no Harness Lightning, I'll tell you that.
So if Austin can dump his hand onto the battlefield, I'm really interested what these last 2 cards in Ely's hand are. I mean, I guess if they're both Harness Lightnings, then Austin's in trouble. Just, 2 removal spells. But let's look at the board. It is 10 damage if Austin can turn on that Hazaret.
I think you have to read Ely for being empty. I just don't know if you can beat a removal spell in his hand from here. There's just so much power on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
Austin's now down to 7.
Maybe you can beat 1, but not 2.
If you don't get out of combat with a win this turn, you don't have very great blocks on the following turn.
No, he'll probably lose his whole board on the next block.
Right, and then the next turn, you just lose.
Right. Well, regardless, if there is a lethal attack for Austin, it would involve Hazoret. He's got 4 cards in his hand and 4 lands in play. Gonna have to figure out ways to discard or cast these spells.
Yeah, without a land drop, that means just one more spell gumming up the works.
Yeah.
And also, it's just less mana to try to empty the hand.
I always like when you see plays like players sacrificing Bomat Courier just to attack with Hazoret. Things like that.
Can't say I've ever been in a position to make that one, but it sounds kind of nice.
Austin just passes, no land, no anything. We're back to Kassis. And that is not a good sign for the red mage. Here's Harness Lightning. That'll take care of Harsh Mentor. He gets even more energy. And now, with his stockpile of 14 energy and 3 cubs, because Harsh Mentor isn't there, the combat math is much harder for Austin Collins.
All those cubs are lethal.
Yeah, they all could be 7/7s. What if you add Chandra to the mix? We'll see that out of Kassis.
All those cubs are still lethal.
Chandra will shoot down another blocker. Everything's going to attack. And yeah, there's no way out of that. So, game 1s go each one apiece, the player on the play winning each of them. You mentioned that was pretty important, and that is how it plays out.
Yes. Red deck versus deck with a bunch of good spells. You really need to leverage that advantage of being on the play.
All right, so 1 game apiece. It turns into a best of 3 from here on out. Players will be playing sideboarded games. We'll be back with those matches and the breakdown in just a minute. All right, so the sideboarded games are going to begin here between Austin Collins and Ely Kassis. Collins, by virtue of being the lower seed, will be on the play for the first one of them. Let's look at the sideboards, though. So from Austin Collins, we see the ability to go big. It certainly is what he did in his quarterfinal match. 3 Chandra Torture Defiance, 3 PNLR, 2 Abrade, 2 Aethersphere Harvester, 2 Glorybringer, and 2 Rampaging Ferocidon.
Pretty into more Rampaging Ferocidon. That card was largely the story of game 1.
Looked great.
I also like PNLR a good amount when you expect your opponent to be mulliganing or relying on having some cheap removal spells in the opening hand. A creature that's worth 2 bodies, usually pretty good.
Now with cards like Glorybringer and Chandra Torture Torch of Defiance. The more cards like that Austin boards in, the more he's starting to play Ely's game.
Yes, though particularly when you're on the play, it can be relatively easy to leverage a Chandra. The biggest thing you have to worry about is getting hit by a Chandra's defeat. If it's either a removal spell or Ely's been spending all of his time removing your creatures and you play on an empty board, you can pull way ahead with the Chandra.
All right, so that's what we have for Austin Collins. Now on Ely Kassis' side, he has 13 different cards in his sideboard. The first two, Deathgorge Scavenger and Chandra's Defeat, look like slam dunks.
Yeah, those ones are great. Scavenger, capable of gaining life, also kind of goes toe-to-toe in combat with basically every creature in Austin's deck. You know, not so much Hazoret or not so much Glorybringer if that one's coming in, but it's still pretty strong. I like Revolutionary Rebuff a decent amount. It's less good on the draw, but being able to counter a Hazoret, certainly great. A Chandra, I'll take that. Even a Rampaging Ferocidon, that's pretty reasonable. I like Essence Scatter. That'll hit Hazoret.
Yeah, we're looking at the cards that cost small amounts of mana, so Magma Spray, Essence Scatter. What about something like Hour of Devastation? It's expensive, but it is a sweeper, and it cleans up Hazoret.
The fact that it kills Hazoret makes it worth considering. Probably a fair degree better on the play than on the draw, though it seems fine to have it in your deck in either situation.
Now players are going to look at their opening 7s. Yeah, I mean, Temur Energy is one of the strengths of the deck because of how mid-range it is its ability to sideboard, really to kind of like board out the bad cards, board in the good cards in each matchup.
Yeah, access to 3 colors of spells is also pretty nice.
No 1-drop this game for Austin Collins. First game without one. However, he does have a 2-mana spell. It is Carry Zev.
Cards with a lot of damage if he doesn't answer it quickly.
Yeah, part of the difficulty when Ely's on the draw seems to be finding windows to cast his own creatures. He'd love to play a Servant of the Conduit or a Long Tusk Cub here, but there's so much damage if he does that even when they're in his hand, he likely just has to use the removal spell instead.
Right.
And we see Harness Lightning shoots down Carry Zev. And Austin will cast a replacement one.
Carry Zev does get pretty bad pretty quick in this matchup. Getting to connect for 3 on turn 2, that's a nice spot, or turn 3 rather. That's a nice spot. Over time, Ely assembles a good mix of blockers.
Yeah.
Starts to just not even worry about the Carry Zev.
Yeah, cards like Whirler Virtuoso really can shut it down. It's 2 blockers. Carry Zev trades with the bad half of the card.
Right.
So this time Ely was willing to take some damage. It's Servant of the Conduit. He leaves up 1 red.
Yeah, 1 red. Could be Chandra's Defeat if you're going to kill the Carry Zev, but that's the only option.
It is Spiral of Canal. He has that one of Spell Pierce that showed up this match.
It'd be really nice to catch a Chandra on this turn with that.
So here is a swing. Carry Zev and Ragavan swing in. Ely's going to block none of it. So he takes full 3, goes down to 16. And then post-combat, Austin will fire off Lightning Strike at the Servant of the Conduit. No other threat, though. And we're noticing on Austin's turns a lot of unspent mana. Turn 1 playing nothing. Turn 3 playing a 2-drop. Turn 4 just playing a 2-mana spell. When you're playing a red deck, that adds up.
Right. Presumably, hand pretty long on burn spells.
Long Tusk Cub, the play here from Ely, and passes. And there's only 2 energy in reserve. So a Lightning Strike could be lethal from Austin. He's going to go for it. If Ely has a Harness Lightning, however, this could be a blowout.
Yeah, just make some energy, get it up to a 4/4.
Yeah.
You kind of want to just Harness Lightning the Carry Zev even still.
Yeah, I think Ely has the Harness Lightning, and he's debating between those 2 plays. There's some temptation to put him on the Cub.
Yeah, the Cub means that the Carry Zev's only going to connect for 1 point of damage.
Yeah. Harness Lightning. So if you're going to use it to pump the Cub, style question, Ryan, do you target the Cub or the Carry Zev?
Definitely the Cub.
And that's what he does. So he uses Harness Lightning, spends none of the energy, then spends 2 energy to make his Cub into a 4/4. Now, if Austin has a follow-up Glorybringer, he will have played Ely really well here.
Well, this one's pretty good, too.
This one's good. I mean, Hazoret's great. So the God swings in, Carry Zev swings in. Ragavan will attack into the cat, but it's still 7, make that 6 damage across. Ely drops down to 10.
10 is a life total you're pretty happy seeing your Temur Energy opponent on.
Yeah.
Especially when you're still at 20.
Yeah, Hazoret is no joke here. Ely may try to race. Here is a Toon with Aether. It's going to find him a second green mana source.
So for potential answers to the Hazoret, Ely potentially has that Hour of Devastation, Confiscation Coup. None of those would be live this turn because of the Attune. You won't have access to 5 mana just yet. There is one in a sideboard that might have come in, a copy of Commit to Memory that could buy him a little bit of time.
Sure. We can buy you a turn. You can wait till Austin draws and put it back.
Right. You'd need a follow-up, though.
Right.
Ely still has to look at actually closing the game.
Yeah, he's in a bit of a bind with the Long Tusk Cub as to whether he wants to attack or block with it. I suppose he could grow Cub up to a 6/6 and hope that it just can block for him for a few turns. A lot of things could go wrong if he goes for that play, but it's there.
Yeah, the other issue is the Hazoret just starts throwing cards at your face.
Yeah. And we see Deathgorge Scavenger from Ely Kassis. That one's out of the sideboard.
Life gain's not bad.
No, that'll put Ely up to 12. Exiles away a card in Collins' graveyard. But Cub is only a 4/4, so we're worried about this Hazoret. There's no great block for Ely.
Also still pretty free to attack with the Karizev because of the Menace. If Ely wants to throw both creatures in front of that, and Austin needs to connect for 7, that's pretty good.
And Austin's not even going to give him the option. Shock takes care of the 3/2. A great trade on mana. Austin gets to swing both again, and Ely still can't kill any of the attackers.
The Prize has to make the same block he made last time.
Yeah, on Ragavan. And so he takes 6 more, drops down to 6. And Lightning Strike to finish off the Long Tusk Cub. It had 2 damage on it from Ragavan.
I like that Lightning Strike. Obviously, with Ely at 6, there's some temptation to throw that upstairs, but it's really easy to close with Hazoret from here.
Well, by playing it that way, he does run some risk of Confiscation Coup, but even then...
Kind of.
Yeah, it's not that great, is it?
For 3 with the Karizev next turn, then.
Yeah, and then there's Ramanap Ruins. You're right, there's not a great out.
Yeah, Ely's in all kinds of trouble.
I think he was hoping that Deathgorge Scavenger might gain him some life while he figured out an answer.
I thought you'd let me attack with that one.
Yeah. Whirly Virtuoso from Kassis brings him up to 6 energy. That will make some blockers. That could hold the Hazoret off for a while. Could double block Karizev.
And with an empty hand going into the turn, Austin free to just draw his card and make his attacks.
Here's a swing. Ely can make up to 3 blockers. It's interesting to see what he wants to do here. A Thopter has to go in front of Hazoret. That part's easy.
Yes.
He could block Ragavan and take 1. Or he could double block Karizev, take 2, but then get rid of the Karizev. Looks like he goes for the other option, just taking care of the monkey token. We'll go to 5 from the Pirate. Ragavan goes away.
If he were to make the play where he made a Thopter and double blocked the Karizev, a removal spell would make that really poor. Not only is he just taking the 2 off of the token, but then he's not killing the Karizev.
I don't know if he can beat a removal spell. You're right. A removal spell would get him.
Yeah,
because the Virtuoso has damage on it right now.
I don't know if he can beat the mandatory card that Austin has to draw every turn.
Yeah, I mean, because they're all 2 damage off Hazoret.
I don't know if he can beat the basic premise of the game.
Yeah, well, he can't really do it without life gain, and he just doesn't play that much life gain.
He's already been through 1 Deathgorge Scavenger.
Yeah. Here's Bristling Hydra. And right, we look at this, because between these Ramanap Ruins and the Hazoret on the board, with him at 5, like he has to gain life. He can't deal 20 before Austin deals 5. That's just not what his deck does.
Right.
And you see he's going to try with Virtuoso attacking. And Austin, sure. Here's Sunscorched Desert. He'll throw that at Ely. He's down to 3.
Well, that just makes these attackers lethal, assuming nothing.
Yes, it does.
Really easy to get 1 card out of the hand to attack, and if it's a spell on top of that, forget about it.
All right, well, there's land 5 again.
That's a Ramanap Runes activation.
They both swing. There is a Harness Lightning for Karizev, and Ely's going to fire that one off before attacks, so no Ragavan.
Attack with Hazoret's still pretty good. At best, You get the chump block out of the Hydra.
Well, I kind of like, so Austin actually just says go. Figures both, whether he attacks or blocks, he's got Ely in 2 turns.
I suppose no matter what, Austin can just discard this card of the Hazoret, even if it goes away for whatever reason. He still has Ramming Nap Runes on the following turn.
Yeah, I like it. It would have traded with a Thopter token, and he'd rather leave back the Hazoret to block the Hydra to slow down Ely's racing back.
Sure, sure.
Rogue Refiner from Kassis. If he draws Deathcourt Scavenger, he may get himself another turn. I think that may be the only draw he has. Seems to swing just with the Thopter token, puts Collins down to 17. Says go. Discard 2 Hazoret. Kassis at 1. No instant speed life gain for Ely. So this activation of Ramanap Ruins should do it. And Austin Collins takes game 3. He's now built a 2-1 lead. And Ryan, you're right, the person on the play winning each of these games.
It's just paramount in this matchup.
Yeah, Ely now, he's got game 4, which is his advantage. He'll be on the play, but you know, he's gonna have to break serve in game 5.
Right.
All right, so players are reconsulting their sideboard, seeing if they want to do any play draw switching. While they do that, we're gonna take a short break. So Austin Collins putting those sideboarding notes back into his box. Players allowed to consult notes and deck lists between games, but not once the game has started. So the last time we saw Ely on the play was game number 2. And in fact, he even mulliganed to 6, but won in a fairly comfortable fashion.
Yes, and the way this matchup kind of goes, for the red deck, the coin flip is very important. It's much harder for the red deck to break serve, whereas Team Red Energy, if you have a good mix of efficient spells, a couple of removal spells, and especially if the Ramming Nap red deck doesn't get Hazoret on time, you can win games on the draw, fairly convincingly even. Ramming Nap red needs more things to go right, or even just things to go wrong for Teamer if it's going to win games on the draw. You'd love to see some 3-color mana-based stumbles on the red side, though with Tune with Ether, Ether Hub, these things don't happen a ton, especially when the first 3 land drops are the most important. The 4 and 5 mana spells are really not the prizes for Team Energy here. They just have to play quickly and efficiently.
So we will have Ely on the play, looking at our 7s. I was surprised to see Austin still maintain the aggressive role so well that game without a 1-drop. It's the first time we've seen him go. Game 1 he had a Bomat Courier to start. Game 2 he had a Soulscar Mage. Game 3 he had nothing, but it still felt like he was ahead.
Yeah, you have a good mix of relatively high impact 2s, 3s, and of course Hazoret on 4.
Yeah.
You have some heavy hitters.
So for the first time, Ely has a 1-mana play for game number 4. This, of course, is Attune with Aether. I've been describing it this weekend as the divination for 1 mana out of the Teamer deck.
You play a number of games where you keep a shock in your opener, and the one thing you really don't want to see is Attune into Long Tusk Cub.
Yeah. Well, here's Beaumont Courier from Austin. So going back to the 1-drops as opposed to the 1-mana removal, he puts a card under it. These Beaumont Couriers on the play convert into a lot of cards in the matchup. On the draw, it is a lot less impactful.
Yeah. Bigger check is whether Ely has a removal spell. If you're just playing creatures, usually you're able to get a couple attacks in, use your removal spells, clear the way.
Second line for Ely, and he passes, so looks like he is going to represent a removal spell. And Austin will keep the creatures coming. Here's Earthshaker Kenra. There's going to be a removal spell, but Ely has to pick which one.
If it's a Magma Spray, I like firing off on the Kenra.
Card under Courier.
Kenra is also more damage now, so the question is frequently, do I have 2 removal spells? If you have 2, take care of the Kenra, get the Beaumont Courier later.
If you just have 1, then the Courier is a guaranteed 3rd card. Ely chooses the Courier with Harness Lightning. So if you're on the red side, you're thinking that this is only a removal spell if this is the play he's choosing to make.
Right.
That
Alternatively, Ely's lining up to have 2-drop plus Magma Spray on the 3rd turn.
Okay.
We'll find out sooner than later.
Ether Hub brings Ely up to 5 stockpile energy, and Rogue Refiner brings him to 7. It's enough to spin his Marvel next turn.
Rogue Refiner doesn't match up super well against Earthshaker Kenra, but at least replaces itself. Also, it'll be able to block even if there's another Kenra.
Yeah, Kenra attacks. We'll see if Ely just makes that trade. It's trading down on mana, but life total is what matters to him. He blocks. And now here's the card we saw really win Austin Game 1. It's Rampaging Ferocidon.
Kind of based on how things played out, don't really think Ely has another 2-mana removal spell, though this turn is a big check for Chandra.
Yeah, Chandra here would be huge. It's not Chandra, but it is Bristling Hydra. So Ely will go to 16. And that Menace on Ferocidon is going to show up again. There's just the 1 blocker for Kassis. I have to admit, this is the most I've seen of this card in a tournament as of late, and I am impressed.
Big fan. I picked up 4 of these on Magic Online almost immediately.
And Ferocidon swings in for 3, Kassis down to 13. And how about another Ferocidon?
Hey, if 1's good. How do you feel about 2? And Ely just has to play more creatures.
Yeah, he has to play more creatures. And now he's taking 2 damage per creature, 2 menace, 3/3 threats. This is very real.
Yeah, just the 2 abilities on this card just synergize very well. You need 2 creatures to block, and if you play more creatures, you take damage.
5th land from Kassis. He's looking for a Haymaker. A Glorybringer here would be very nice. He's going to put a counter on Hydra. Make that 3 counters on Hydra.
Is this Hour of Devastation? Oh, wow.
And Hour of Devastation. So this is huge. So you made the Hydra up to 7/6. Hour of Devastation deals 5 damage to each creature, but that's not enough. It takes both Austin's creatures. Austin takes 7 on the attack. The board's swept. That's a game-winning play here. Austin comes back with Hazard, but he's got more cards in his hand.
Yeah, can't attack or block with that just yet. Going to be taking at least 7 more damage this turn.
And you know, there's almost no sweepers in Ely's deck. I was thinking that Ely was I was unsure that he was going to be able to beat the double Ferocidon. This was the card that could do it.
Yes.
You see this another swing of Hydra puts Austin down to 5. Ely's just straight racing now.
Really well set up by you there.
Yeah, that was nice. 2 Long Tusk Cubs and he will pass.
Ooh, that is a scary follow-up as well.
Well, yeah, he still had all these cards left over. Rogue Refiner happened before. You know, the way he made the energy was Refiners into Tunes. That's one of the reasons why Teamer is so good, is that we get all these things and then we just have cards left over.
Right.
Carries out for Austin. Still 2 cards in hand. He can go down to 1 card by using Hazaret's ability, but Confiscation coup from Kassis, that's going to take care of the blocker. That's going to take care of the game. Ely takes game number 4 to force the final game 5. He holds serve, so to speak. On the play, he wins 4, but now the big test is going to be the last game here.
Right. A lot of pressure on Austin to have a very good, proactive, efficient hand on the play in game 5. And just as much pressure or more on Ely to be able to break all that down.
All right, so this last game is going to be to see who will meet Sam Black in the finals. We're going to have the conclusion of the match between Austin Collins and Ely Kassis in just a minute. So we shuffle up now for the last game here. Austin Collins, for the third time this set, is going to be on the play. He has won every time on the play.
As has Ely Kassis.
Yeah, as has Ely. And the closest one felt like the third game. Austin didn't have a 1-drop, but Ely never had it. I mentioned it then. He didn't have this window to put down a 2-drop. And what I want to see is what it's going to take to get a Long Tusk Cub into play. And what I'm looking at out of Ely's deck is a lack of 1-mana removal. And that's what why it feels like he never gets to make creatures.
Yes. Though in these sideboarded games, things get a little bit better on those lines. Those 2 Chandras defeat that extra Magma Spray. I guess it's the second Magma Spray.
Mm-hmm.
That helps a little bit, though the volume's not very high. I felt like Game 4 was very close. The end didn't look that way because that Hour of Devastation singularly turned things on their head.
You know, you're right. Outside of that 1 of Hour, it was looking like we might see Austin Collins into the finals in 4.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of too many other cards that stabilize so convincingly from there.
Right. And Austin's going to lead on a mulligan.
All right.
That's not what you want to see in a deciding game like this.
No, I mean, he's on the draw with the red deck, so he can take 1 mulligan here and be okay. No, he's on the play.
He still has the initiative.
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes mulliganing enables you to
Hazret,
attack with
yeah.
Hazret, so, you know, hopefully we see one of those games.
Right, it's like, hey, you just play your turn for Hazard and it's like, oh, I only have 1 card in my hand. How
I
nice.
seem to have mulligan into the perfects.
It does put more pressure on him to have one of his 4 Hazarets.
Yes, and not 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, that would be less good. Well, 2's okay. 2's okay because the other one's your last card in hand.
Right, 2 is frequently fine.
3 is bad. And mention here Ely Kassis from New York, 14 open top 8s and a win this year. Austin Collins, 15-year-old from Missouri. This is his first invitational. So Austin starts on a mountain, but no turn 1 play for Kassis. He does have that attune.
Things are definitely salvageable. You'd like to see a Bomac Courier on turn 1, though. Having something on 2 and 3, that can be impactful.
Yeah, we did see him win game 3 without a 1-drop. The big thing is he needs to put down enough pressure that Ely can't just make a Long Tusk Cub, especially because Ely has a turn 1 attune. Cub is scary here. And Austin's going to pass again on the second land, and I'd be concerned now from the red side.
Yeah, looks like a handful of lightning strikes, which are fine.
Yeah,
and don't close the game.
Long Tusk Cub from Kassis, a Braid from Collins. He can remove it at least through that through the attune. But you see, there's a shock in Collins' hand, and he doesn't even get to convert it here. And no threats. And
the way
we should
things
be
have
worried.
been playing out, he's not on pace to have a Hazret on time either.
Well, I mean, land Hazret is, I think, what he's looking for here. If he's going to win this game, that's going to be how.
Right. It won't be able to attack, though.
No, it'll be slow. It'll have to be the kind of thing where he lands a Hazret and Ely just doesn't have an answer.
Mm-hmm. That's the hope.
Long Tusk Cub again for Kassis, and that 2 energy hanging out just is burying that shock in Austin's hand, too. He's going to shock it. Kassis puts the 1 counter on it, and he's going to shock it again. And when you're on a mulligan, having a 2 for 1 yourself there, now that's just compounding the damage.
Yeah, he at least cleared the energy out, but that's a very small win.
Do we have Hazret? The follow-up is almost Hazret, but it is not. It's Soul Scar Mage. It's
very similar cards.
He had 2 cards left, so he makes the 4th land. I'm like, all right, come on, just you play the god. We can win. It's going to have to come off the top. Here is Bristling Hydra from Ely Kassis. And in game 5 right now, for the team card hoarder player here, it looks like he may finally break serve against Austin Collins. He needs to dodge a couple more draw steps. I think once Ely gets ahead in the race,
you can just forget
then
about
you can,
it at
right,
that point.
Right. Right now the race is still even. And when things look desperate, frequently just attacking is the play. Here is Soul Scar Mage from Collins. And Ely's now going to think, is there any reason to not block here? And no, he puts the 4-3 in front of it. He's got 3 energy up. Here's the third shock. And this is just the worst part. Austin's on the mulligan, and he's just drawing triple shock. So he gets shock and lightning strike to take care of the Hydra. Hydra's down.
Got rid of the energy, too, so he's empty-handed.
Yeah, got rid of all of his cards. So Austin just needs Haz right off the top. He's down 5 cards to Ely, and they're basically tied on life points. You see Deathgorge Scavenger, Long Tusk Cub. Needs the god this turn. It's not, it's a land.
Yeah, land's certainly not going to do it.
No.
Without a spell, that Long Tusk Cub's just going to get out of hand. The Deathgorge Scavenger is going to gain some more life.
Yeah, and here we go. Ely, Attune. That's some food for the Long Tusk Cub. We land 6 and 2 energy.
The Long Tusk Cub's also just going to be able to connect, make more energy that way.
And a swing, Deathgorge Scavenger going to trigger. It looks like Ely wants more damage. He's confident enough that he doesn't even need to go for life points. Pumps it up to a 4-3. Here is Lightning Strike. That's going to shoot down, it looks like the Long Tusk Cub. It's -1 counters thanks to Soulscar Mage, so no real play here on Ely's side. But in response, he'll Magma Spray away. So no blockers, no cards for Austin. He takes a hit. And Harsh Mentor is just there to block. Austin seeing this one coming right now.
Harsh Mentor lines up pretty well against some of the creatures in Ely's deck. Not with life totals this high, and not against Deathgorge Scavenger.
Right. We saw actually life gain last turn from Kassis on the attack, but now as long as he gets the 1/1, the pump on the attack, Austin doesn't even have a good block.
Mm-hmm. With this much life, that's just fine.
So a swing for 4 from Kassis. Puts Austin down to 13. And he just gets to pass with 3 cards in hand. Austin still looking for Hazoret. Earthshaker, Kenra's the draw. And he'll swing with both. He's down big in the race, 13 to 23. He'll swing for 4, can put Ely to 19.
Yeah, best he can do is just attack.
Yeah.
Neither of these creatures are making good blocks.
Right. I mean, the thing is there's a bind here, right? So if he leaves back his creatures to attack, then Ely hits him with a 4-3. That's no good. If he attacks, Ely can attack and gain life, and then it's like you're racing a life linker. That's not really good either.
Yeah, it gains life and just hits for the same amount, or a comparable amount.
Yeah. A swing here, Austin to 10, Ely back up to 21. Fifth land and a pass for Collins. His deserts are online, but things are just not going his way.
21 is a tall order for Ramunap Ruins.
You need about 9 more lands to pull that off.
Yeah, you need a lot of lands, you need a lot of turns. I don't think that Austin's going to be seeing either of those things.
And Bristling Hydra from Kassis. Gets him up to 6 energy. That's hexproof, 2 hexproof activations. Should give his Hydra insurance from any damage. And, you know, Ely looks like he's going to walk this one in rather than trading away the Scavenger. He's going to go ahead and no attacks. He is very safe right now. And he's just going to press his advantage to the point where it's really unstoppable.
His life total is very high. For Austin to get back into the game, he has to pull ahead on board. Ely's average top deck is significantly more impactful on the battlefield than Austin's. Makes sense to be patient. And for our 8th seed here, doesn't seem to mind much being on the draw.
You know, actually, if you look at our bracket, Ryan, the lower seeded player is undefeated. We're gonna have the 8 versus 7 in the finals. Our top 4 was the 5, 6, 7, and 8. If that holds true, it's good news for Ely Kassis. He's the 8th seed.
I am the lowest of the low seeds.
Maybe that's the trick to standard. Take the draw.
Extra cards are nice.
swing here, and Austin is in the spot where he has to start blocking his creatures away. Earthshaker Kenra now into the graveyard. Land 6 means he'll eternalize the Kenra. As a blocker, passes the turn.
He's at 10.
Yep. Confiscation Coup from Ely Kassis.
That creature has
Takes
haste.
the eternalized Kenra. Yeah, that's
That creature's
keeps
untapped.
haste. It sure does, because it didn't attack. It is untapped. It has haste. It can attack. Takes that. Swings the team. Deathgorge Scavenger. Going to eat a card, and there is the hand. So quite the run here for Austin Collins. Was one of our two youngest players to top 8 in Invitational, both him and Rio Trevathan